Hello interwebs, welcome to Let's Fix Computers. I've got an Asus Republica Gamers laptop here. This is a Strix G. Model number is a G531G to be precise. And this needs a new charger jack on it. So I'll just plug in the charger and I can just demonstrate this issue. But what I'll do now, actually, I'll show you how to check for a bad DC jack first of all, because sometimes it's not always obvious. So I've already taken most of the screws out the back of this when I was doing the assessment of the laptop. So I'll just take out these two screws I put back in and take the side panel off. The other screws are here, here, and here. And then there's 4 along the back. And then just this entire bottom panel comes off with a little bit of difficulty, I might add. This one will come off easily because I've already had it off once already, but the first time you take the panel off is always the hardest. As you can see, this is actually filthy on the inside as well. This is smoker's dust. We'll talk more about that when we get to it, but we're going to have to clean all of that up. So there's grot in here that we've got to deal with as well. So what I'm going to do is I've disconnected the internal battery. So if you want to check if the DC jack works, the easiest way is to make sure you unplug or disconnect the battery internally. So that way, the only way the laptop can be powered is from the DC jack. Whereas if you're trying to do this while it has battery available to it, you're going to constantly get like false positives where you're not going to be sure if it's actually on battery power or mains power and so on. And this is especially true because Windows will often have, you know, a second or so of delay as it registers whether the laptop is on charge or not. So it can be very easy to not be sure if you've got a bad connection. And so I don't mean just simply it works, it doesn't work, but an intermittent connection where it's where it's jittery. So if I plug this guy in at the back, whoop, it does go in with a click. It feels, it doesn't feel horrendous. It's a little bit wobbly, but they all are. So if I power this on, oh, there you go. It hasn't powered on, so that's a good start. If I hold this at an angle and power it on, now what if I hold it upwards? Oh, okay. Well, that's pretty damn conclusive. Oh, there it goes. There we go. We've got a power line now. So I'm going to spam. Oh, and it's gone again. Okay. You get the idea. The DC jack doesn't work. If you unplug the battery, it's very easy to tell. So let's disassemble. And also roll the intro. I'm livid. I did the full disassembly and forgot to hit unpause on the recording because that happens. My workflow is broken and I need to fix my OBS layout so it's got a big flashing light when I'm paused so I know that I'm paused. Anyway, so I've roughly put everything into place just so you can see how this thing came apart. So a few things of note. So I've taken out SSD and Wi-Fi card is removed. Couple of interesting things that came up that I spent a long time waffling over. I want to point out let me just remove the hard drive and the battery here. Taking the screws out already. This thing had a really bizarre Wi-Fi setup in that I wanted to show you guys. So I'm just going to put the Wi-Fi card back in place. That went in there. Now get this. This laptop, I'd noticed as soon as I'd taken the cover off that the Wi-Fi antennas were going to the motherboard. Now this is very unusual because it implies that the Wi-Fi chipset is on the motherboard itself, which is very uncommon because that means that the motherboard designers have to design and certify the wireless functionality of it. It now means that this is a Wi-Fi motherboard and it now has to pass emissions regulations and stuff like that. Whereas if you just use a plug-in card, this is the only thing that needs to pass the emissions testing, which is why it's very uncommon to see Wi-Fi built into the motherboard, even though all laptops have built-in Wi-Fi. If you're like Apple and you're rolling your own, then whatever, but very unusual. This one, the antennas will go to the motherboard, and the Wi-Fi card had these two little fly leads. These two little antenna leads went from the Wi-Fi module to the motherboard. And then there's a 4 antenna breakout on the motherboard, which goes to these two antennas, and then there's another antenna underneath each speaker. So I thought this was an absolutely bizarre, bonkers Wi-Fi configuration, and I don't understand why it's been done that way. So if anyone in the comments knows what the hell what was going on with that, I'd be really interested to know, because I thought that was a fascinating, bizarro Wi-Fi configuration. So let me know. Other observations that I also made during disassembly, it has one of these annoying tiny little CMOS batteries in it. This is a CR1220, and it's a tiny little CMOS cell. These things are far too low capacity to be useful, and this thing is stone dead. It's dead flat. I tested that with the multimeter. It was like, 20 millivolts kind of thing. It's flat, completely dead. So that's going to need to be replaced. I think there's room for in here that I can cram in this CR2032, which is a proper size CMOS battery. The BIOS battery was basically just sitting there, and this is empty space, so I'm fairly certain I can just stick that down there instead. So that's my plan for that. So that's that solved. Other things of note, the fans are proper gross, like mega gross, like some of the worst I've ever seen in my career gross. So as I mentioned in the intro, this is smoker's dust. It's a mixture of cigarette smoke tar grossness, and it makes this horrible muck that is just clogging up all of these fans. This doesn't blow through the cooling system. I'm actually amazed that this laptop still works. I have seen it post, I know it does work, but this definitely would have been having cooling problems because these fans would have had no airflow. So this thing would have been running almost passive. And yeah, this is absolutely horrendous. It's not very often that I go, ugh, gross kind of thing, because a lot of YouTubers kind of play that bit up and they're always like, I don't know, grow up, it's dust, it's part of the job. It's like a mechanic getting squicky about getting dirty hands. It's part of the job, just get on with it. However, this is proper gross. So yeah, we're going to have to really clean these guys up. So yeah, we're gonna clean all of that up. So that's the fans and cooling system. So I've already disconnected all of these cables, so I'll just lift this guy back out. I did show all of the screws, but whatever. I'm not putting all of the screws back in for a retake. This is why videos get thrown out when this happens. However, for this one, I was like, no, I want this video. We're redoing it. So this gets us down to the bare motherboard. The motherboard is fairly honest. We've got dust on the bottom, but this is what I call honest dust. Just little bits of dust here and there. This will all brush off. No signs of liquid damage or anything like that. So nothing to report there. And then finally, we've got the cooling system. So I'll just take these screws back out. Spoilers, I've already taken this off once, but I guess I'll do it again. So we've got 8 screws here. Now, this particular one, it doesn't have thermal pads under the VRM and VRAM chips. It has that kind of thermal gunk where it's like a big thick paste. It's like peanut butter under there, smooth peanut butter to be precise. So that stuff, I don't have any spare of it. So what I'll probably do is just kind of reconstitute it a bit. So we'll cover that bit when we get to it. So to remove it, this is going to come off easily now, but what I did was I just very gently twisted back and forth, gently lifting until it released. So there we go. So that comes off like so. And that brings us back to where we got up to. So the good news is, by doing this retake, I probably just cut about 10 or 15 minutes out of the video time. So you're welcome, people who want shorter videos. Okay, I am now going to clean up this motherboard. I'm going to remove the thermal paste from the cores. I'm not going to remove... Actually, I will remove the thermal paste from over here because we're going to be putting a lot of heat down over here. This stuff is all going to get burnt up and melt anyway, so I'll clean that area up. Some of this stuff I'm going to try and leave there just so I can just remold it and reuse as much as possible. And that will be fine because, as I also pointed out in the first take, you don't need a huge amount of cooling on these VRAM modules and VRMs. You just need some cooling. And you can tell that that was also all that was intended because these cold plates, these aluminium cold plates, these don't actually have any meaningful thermal coupling onto the heatsink. They're just spot welded on. And there's going to be some heat transfer through there, but not much, you know. This is mainly just a single cold plate just to provide better than nothing cooling. So we don't need to overthink that too much. So I'm now going to pause and I'm going to clean up this board so we're ready to actually start desoldering. So I shall see you guys after the cut for realsies this time. Right, so the board is now cleaned up, so we can take a good look at this DC jack. And the first thing that we notice on it, or that I'm looking for, is I'm looking for cracked solder joins, or just like the pin... Whoops, I'm off shot. I'm looking for cracked solder joins, or the pins being cracked, or anything like that. And I'm not seeing anything of that sort. I think this one is damaged internally, because inside the jack there... there will be spring things, you know, spring levers that press in on the actual plug and stuff like that. And those spring levers have worn out and just been pushed aside or just making poor contact. That's the problem with this guy. Sometimes you'll see a very clear fault on the jack itself, but that's not what is going on with this one. The jack is just worn out and needs to be replaced. So my approach for this is... I'm going to hot air this out of the board, but first I'm going to wet the joins. I'm going to rearrange all of this so I can get to it. I'm going to wet the joins with low melt solder. And that is going to lower the melting point of all of these joins and make them easier to work on. So there might be some crazy camera angles here while I get my stand around to a good angle. So where's my low melt solder gone? Someone asked me recently what low melt solder I use. The answer to that is whatever I found on eBay, basically. It's some big thick boy stuff, but low melt solder, you don't really use this for putting stuff on the board. Apparently bismuth solder you shouldn't use it long term, but it's very good for desoldering because it allows you to effectively just lower the melting point of the join and effectively prepare it for desoldering, which is what I want it for. So I'm going to heat up my iron. We're going in at 400C for this one because we're on big heavy joints, so we want as much heat as we can in here to get everything nice and hot. And when we actually go for the reflow, we're going to want to try and avoid putting too much heat into the CPU, which is right here. Thankfully, we've got some metalwork around it, so we've got some safety margins, but even still. Right, let's just get that guy on there. And I'm going to hold this against the join just to make sure I actually melt the join and that low melt solder just mixes in. That's what we want, is we want to mix it in. We don't want it to just sit on the surface, which is what it will try and do. We don't want a low melt cap. We just want to get it right in there. I mean, it's not going to fully mix in, but like the more we can get into the join, the better. Failing that, just having a molten blob on top of the join improves things because there's just something to hold heat against the solder that you're actually trying to reflow, which helps. And again, we're not worried about putting on big old blobs here. Big old blobs of solder are helpful because, again, that's more thermal mass against the joins we're trying to flow. There we go. All right, now we're going to turn on the hot air. We're going to come in at 420 degrees, maximum airflow. And I'm going to be angling this direction, basically coming in and going toward the end. So I'm going away from the CPU, away from my stand, away from the stuff that I don't want to melt. And I'm going to have a pair of pliers in my hand to actually yank the thing off. So I'm going to have those on like that to basically just ease that off. I'm going to adjust my stand because this is wobbling. And I want something that's nice and stable. This isn't a very good thing. People also tell me I need a better board holder, but man, it's hard because a lot of board holders are designed for holding small boards, and it's hard to find something that can hold things at the kind of angles that I want. This small vise is kind of the best thing I've found for the job, really. Okay, here comes the hot air, everyone. Hopefully we're in focus where I want to be. Right, so this is probably going to melt the DC jack because I'm coming in with a lot of heat right onto the plastic. This is fine, we don't care. I might go nozzle off for this actually because I've got a small nozzle on and a big area to heat. Yeah, I need a bigger nozzle. Here we go, starting to move. This guy at my bottom right. There we go, now it's moving. Once a joint starts moving, it'll generally stay moving, so... Come on, who's holding me up? I want this to come out now. Who's holding me up? Bottom right has gone solid. I don't want to do too much twisting and graunching because that's how you break up a board. But also, this guy won't come out without a little bit of GBH. There it goes. Here we go. There we go. Oof. That was a bit more dramatic than I'd like it to be, but that's okay. Right, I can just about hold my finger against the CPU, so that's good. Like it's uncomfortable, but I can just about do it. So there wasn't too much heat transmission into that. Now we're looking on top. Blobby, but that's okay. We can clean up these holes now. Just in case anyone was wondering how I had the board clamped then, I was clamping against this bracket and these holes. So it looked like I was onto the CPU, but I was actually onto the CPU supports, which are effectively structural. But even still, this is an awkward board to clamp. Okay, so now we've got to clear these holes, so I'm going to use a bit of fresh leaded solder. I'm going to add a little bit of flux on there, not a huge amount, because the desoldering gun doesn't like flux fumes, but it does help to add a little bit in there. Right, this guy is ready to go. This is going to get noisy, people, so, you know, noise warning. And I'm going to feed in a little bit of solder to get the joint flowing, and then suck the whole lot out, and we should come back up with clean holes afterwards. Here we go. Goes a little something like this. Oh, it's so good. When it works, it's brilliant. people asked me in the comments why didn't I use this on the sound card that I did recently. This guy's not so good on really small holes. These holes are reasonably large, so this is a perfect candidate. This is exactly what I bought this gun for. Yeah, if the desoldering gun pulls up some of the flux, you get smoke coming out the back of it, and it's a bit scary. There we go. Look at that. All clear in one go. That was textbook. I'm very happy with that. Right, here's my replacement DC jack, which I bought on eBay by typing in the model number of the laptop with DC jack after it. I think it cost me like £3 or £4, I think, or something like that. Actually, I think this one was expensive, but again, for one-offs, doesn't really matter. So now I can put that on there, and I should just be able to press that into place. The holes are never truly clear, so I will have to just do a little bit of a press, but that should just press fit in. And I do want to make sure that it's perfectly flat on the board, because otherwise you just get the DC jack has to go in at a weird angle and stuff like that, and it's just not nice. There we go. That's perfectly flat on the board. Beautiful. All right. Flip it over again. Cool. Right, now I'm just going to run fresh solder into all of these. My solder has rosin flux mixed into it, so I don't need to add in any additional flux for this, although you can do that if you feel like it's helping you. It's up to you. The one thing I would say is add plenty of solder, because remember that hole is going to hold a lot of solder, and you want it to really fill up and hold on to those anchors. And you want to linger on the joint for a bit longer than you'd expect to, because you need to get heat into the pin. Again, this is a metal connector with a lot of thermal mass, so we need to really linger there and make sure the heat goes into the connector and the solder actually bonds to it, instead of just flowing around it but not bonding to it. That's how you get a dry joint. Right, that's done. Let's have a look at the other side. Right, I'm pretty happy with that. I'm going to put some extra solder on the anchor pins, just so there's visible solder blobs on top as well. The back pins that are actually carrying the current, I'm not too fussed about those. Those ones, they're soldered on, and I'm happy that there's a good connection there. The anchors I tend to go overkill on, because I want the anchors to really be structural and really like this will not come off kind of thing. When it comes to anchor points, overkill is underrated. There we go. Big old blobs on the anchors might not look as pretty. However, they sure as heck ain't going to let go. Alright, I'm going to get some alcohol on there and just clean up all of the flux residue. And that guy should be ready to go. There we go. I'm happy with that. That's a really good connection. It's perfectly flat on the board. That guy's not going anywhere. Excellent. Right, I'm basically going to put thermal paste on everywhere where there is some kind of paste, which is going to be a little bit messy and a little bit overkill, but It'll work. That's fine. Put it there. In an ideal world, there's a good chance that this laptop will never need to be taken apart again for the rest of its lifetime now, because it's getting late life cycle anyway, so I think the intention is that this is its final service, basically. Do this now, it'll last the rest of it. Job done. Right, are we covering... Does that get covered? No, but that guy does. There we go. Right, I think that's some extra paste on everything that was pasted. Splat sound.mp3. There we go, that is all done. These heat sinks are fine. I'll give them a little bit of a brush, but most of the horrifying stuff is all on the fans. Right, I'm going to take the fans and this bottom chassis out the back and just blow all of this horrible crud out of them. So my method for this is just going to be, I'm going to start with some compressed air just to blow the worst of it out, and then I'm going to toothbrush all of these blades down, which should be fine. I could possibly take off this top cover. This top cover will come off. It's got a couple of heat stakes here, here, and here, and here. If I pried that off, this top cover will come off. That will give me better access to clean the fan. Then I would have to just, like, you know, roughly put that on and just tape it down or something, or maybe just remelt the heat stakes. I don't think that's going to be necessary. If I go at this with a toothbrush, I'll probably get the worst of it off and it will be okay. But that's something that you could do if you wanted. There comes a point where you could say just buy new fans, but I don't think that's going to be necessary here. Right, I'll be right back with some clean fans and chassis. Alright, I'm back. These fans actually cleaned up pretty nicely. So my technique for this, because with clagged on dust like that, compressed air ain't going to cut it. So what I did was I hold the fan in my hand like this, and I take the toothbrush and I just brush like that while very slowly turning the fan blades, just brushing the surface dust off. Then we turn it over and we do the same thing for the back, just brushing. And like once you've done one way, then do the other way. So we're brushing with the grain, so to speak, in the same direction of the rotor blades, and then we go against the rotor blades, so we're cleaning both sides of them. Be a little bit careful, because these things are fragile, and if you're too rough, you'll just snap them off, and then you need a new fan. But again, you can just toothbrush these down and just doing this basically, and that will get all of that guff out of there. And behind, I'm just doing that with my finger to turn the blades around. And so that's how I managed to get them nice and clean. Then a little bit of compressed air just to blow the dust out that you've just scrubbed off. And as you can see, that's a really good result. I'm amazed these fans still work, quite frankly, but you know, they've cleaned up really nicely, so I'm fairly confident about those. Right, I'm going to start reassembling this, so I'm just going to start dropping everything into place. Here we go. Okay, we're all reassembled here, so I'm going to give it a quick test run before I commit to putting the back cover off. I've left the battery disconnected, so now when I plug it in and it turns on, we can be certain that it's definitely running on the charger. So I'm going to very gently open this up. Remember, when the back cover is unscrewed, you've got to be careful because there's less support. So just gently ease this guy open. Alright, that just plugged in with a really nice satisfying click, so that feels very promising straight off the bat. Okay, power on. Power on. I'm going to spam F2 to take it into setup. Now, because we disconnected the CMOS battery, and the CMOS battery was flat anyway, this might have a long post on it because it's effectively done a BIOS reset. So I'm expecting this to take a moment to fire up. Oh, bloody hell, that frightened the life out of me. Republic of Gamers! Okay, it's posted and it's loading Windows. Oh, I'm too tired for that. Imagine getting jump scared by your ROG laptop. Something, something for those who dare. Alright, restart, restart. That's obnoxious. That's really obnoxious. Okay, right. So, around the back, and you can see the power light there, so I'm wiggling the power cable. Give that a good wiggle. That's a good solid connection. If there was any interruptions there, the laptop would cut out because it's got no battery to support it. So that's definitely a good solid connection. I'm happy with that. Right, and there we have it, everyone. That is one fixed laptop. It is all nice and happy, and these CPU and GPU temperatures will be like much lower by a long shot. Oh, it's got a 1650 in it, so that's a bit more modern than expected. Oh, 9750H. That's not bad either. There we go. This is a really nice laptop. It just needed a really good service, which is exactly what we've done. So yeah, I'm pretty confident about that. Can we feel the fans blowing? There's a slightly warm draft out the right hand, a little bit from the left. So warm air coming out the back is always a good sign because that means that the fans are blowing heat out of the computer. Cold air blowing out is not good because if there's cold air blowing out, that means the fan is blowing but there's no heat in the thermal pipe. Whereas if you've got hot air blowing out the back, that means that hot air, that heat is being pulled out of the chips, put into the radiators and blown out the back of the laptop. So that's all a good sign. It means it's doing what it's supposed to do. So yeah. Our front, our front RGB is very fluorescing. So we know that that's all hooked up properly. RGB, RGB, RGB. Good. Thank you for watching, everyone. I'll see you on the next video. Bye for now.